is Sam Cedar? Tell me.
He's the guy on the Majority Report. He's that guy. The guy
Okay.
with the glasses, a beard. I like a lot of the stuff that they do, but like them and other progressives, podcasts, liberal podcasts out there, they're constantly bashing and criticizing the Dem. That's something that is really getting on my nerves because you see how they're always saying, hey, people are saying, guys, do something. Why are you sitting down? Why aren't you fighting back? And whenever I hear this, it's mind blowing to me because first thing I'm like, well, what can they do? You know, what can they do? How should they do it? And when you begin listening to people, when you ask them that, they have no answers. And I'm like, right, so now you see how they feel. Or when you ask a brother who's against voting
Mm-hmm.
and
Oh,
you're talking about, hey, you know, we got to vote. And these cats be like, well, voting ain't never helped us. We got to do it ourselves. So the first thing I ask them is, how? What's your plan? What's your
right,
solution?
right.
And they can't go anywhere with that.
Well, the for the people who are like, I'm not even going to vote, or voting's never gotten me anywhere, or that type of thing. That is, to me, like the height of just ignorance, meaning just misunderstanding where you live,
Mm-hmm.
how this system works.
Mm-hmm.
And, I understand. You can be apathetic if you want to. You can choose not to participate. I mean, that's what freedom is all about. But if you do choose not to participate, then, in my opinion, you kind of forfeit your ability to complain. I mean, or
Yes.
your right to complain because you
Yeah.
didn't do anything to try to get your voice heard, and
Mm-hmm.
nobody can read your mind.
Right.
So
Right.
so that's where I'm kind of messed up with as far as the voting is concerned, because voting is the foundation of democracy.
Mm-hmm.
So again, when you ask these people for an alternative, okay, you don't want to vote. Great. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so what is your alternative? They don't have one,
No, they don't.
because the most fair, and if you subtract the participation of the citizenry, of
Mm-hmm.
the voters, then you're going to subject yourself to the whims of whoever is in power.
Exactly.
And so
Exactly.
I don't. So it's an illogical argument. It's just dumb.
And when you're sitting in a barbershop and you're listening to all this crap, it is mind blowing. I never forget one time I'm sitting in a barbershop trying to be cool. My son's 7 years old, and I'm listening to these guys, and they were talking about football.
Hmm.
Okay,
Hmm.
they talk about politics, but the one thing I just want to touch on real quick, they were talking about Mike Tomlin. These are just so-called diehard football fans. And this barber was talking about, I don't even know why they got Mike Tomlin even coaching the Steelers. He ain't never even played a lick of football in his life. And that's when I just had it. Howard, I said, hold up, man. You need to be quiet. Mike Tomlin is the all-time leading receiver
Yes.
at William and Mary.
Yes.
You don't know about that because it's William and Mary,
Right.
but he's a talent. So he knows more about football than you ever will. So when I hear a brother talking about not voting and they start saying people like Roland Martin, my guy over the Defiant Lawyers, Augustus Corbett, you got all these brothers out here who know what they're talking about. They talk about the importance of voting. Even Malcolm X talked about that. I even posted a speech about that. How we use the example of the UN, how all the African countries come together and bring their vote to outvote the United States, which has one vote, Russia,
Hmm.
one vote,
Hmm.
Iran, how they come together, that collective, and how it works. But you can't get brothers to see that. And they start talking about people being a Democratic shield, and everybody's listening to Sexy Red, Ice Cube, and and, and Snoop Dogg and Nelly on political advice.
Well, see, I was listening to, and I'm sorry, I don't remember who it was because I want to attribute. It's not my thought of it. I've
Mm.
had this thought, but this brother articulated it better, and so I'd like to give him credit. But right now,
I'll
I
find
don't
out.
remember.
I'll find out who it
But
is.
he was making a point about pseudo intellectuals and intellectuals, and the danger of pseudo intellectuals. And what you have is, and he used the barbershop analogy for the
Mm.
pseudo intellectual. You have a lot of people who, and then he went on to talk about how social media has
Mm.
given a platform to a lot of pseudo intellectuals
It
who
has.
who
It
know
has.
a lot of information. They have, they have some information. They're not necessarily stupid people. An intellectual is somebody who can critically think,
Right.
and with that critical thinking, you challenge your own thoughts.
Right.
Therefore, you change. You mentioned Malcolm X. I think Malcolm X is like the case study of the intellectual. The thing about Malcolm is he's often lauded for statements he made while he was in the Nation of Islam and a leader, and those points were great. And he's a great speaker, and I agree with much of what he said back at that time. Malcolm's story is one of evolution.
Yes, it
It's
is.
one of
Yes.
somebody who came from being a Detroit Red all the
Mm.
way to somebody who was like at the end of his life would really, some people would say, besides those who want to, attribute his death to the FBI,
Mm.
that say that this is really one of the reasons why he was killed, because he was out there saying the stuff I was saying before I have learned is not true.
Right.
This is the truth of Islam. And he
Mm-hmm.
went on to tell what he had gone on to learn. It takes an intellectual to do that,
Mm-hmm.
and what you get a lot of times with these debates in barbershops are people who only know what they know and they don't want to know anymore. So they're
Yeah.
defending a point that they thoroughly understand. Well, sometimes they
I
don't,
just
like,
say sometimes they don't understand what they say.
sometimes they don't, like your Mike Tomlin example.
Yeah.
But sometimes they understand as much as of a subject. What they know of a subject, they know,
Right.
and they know about
Right.
2 or 3 points that they can riddle off, and they
Mm-hmm.
don't want to hear anything else. And unfortunately, for somebody who, like, somebody, say, let's use your example in the barbershop, for somebody who doesn't even know about football, professional football, or even who Mike Tomlin is, if they're
Mm-hmm.
sitting there in the chair listening to this guy's statements about Mike Tomlin and he's articulating them well, he might
Mm-hmm.
think he's absolutely correct.
Right. Right.
And then they go out and repeat these things.
That's why I spoke up.
Right, right. And that's what happens when,
Yeah.
as an intellectual, you should be able to challenge these. Now, I don't know how did he receive, see, he should have said, "Oh, I didn't know that
No, no, that's
about
not
my."
what he said. He said, no, look,
I
that's
know that's
what
not
he
what he said.
said. He said, but why is he always making these stupid adjustments and then they go on these 2, 3 game losing streaks? I said, that happens in the NFL.
Yeah,
You got all these guys, you got guys on each coaching staff who has played the game and most of them have played it at a high level. Not
right,
all of them, but a good majority of the staff has.
right,
When I listen to him, I'm really trying to say, okay, I hear you, and you hear people saying, yeah, and they say it with confidence.
right,
They have this, it sounds good. But the problem is this: we lack humility. It's just like those MAGA hats. When you point out how they are wrong about something, you break it down and you show them the evidence. Then you got people that just say you are a problem. Or why are you asking all these questions? Well, man, and this is the one that blows my mind all the time. Well, if you don't know, you don't know. I'm like, no, I'm not understanding. So educate me on what you're talking about.
right,
It
right,
For me, Howard, I feel that this is probably the biggest thing that is keeping us from making decisions that keep idiots out of power. When you just don't exercise the right to vote, you don't understand. You can put people in position and hold them accountable. Like I talk about the 65%. Brothers say, voting doesn't help. I said, well, we're not voting. If 65% of us went out there and voted, we can control the narrative. That is a solution. That right there. But in order to get to that solution, there's got to be people willing to be humble and realize that, hey, I didn't know. And like you said, Malcolm X is a prime example of that. When he went on that to Mecca, he saw white people with blue eyes and blonde hair. There were also Islam.
Mm-hmm.
And so that takes away from what the Nation of Islam was talking about. And now you got us competing and fighting against each other and not getting shit done.
The key is, like you said, he was driven, willing,
Mm-hmm.
desired to go to Mecca to learn as much as he could.
Right.
You have to have that desire.
Yeah.
See, because if as far as when he joined the nation, just to use that example. See, when
Mm-hmm.
he joined the nation, well, now this is a cinematic example. This isn't history, so I don't
Okay.
want to pretend that the movie
Okay.
Malcolm X is real life. However, there is a scene that Spike used in that movie where the brother who was kind of converting him in jail was asked him to reflect on, do you know any white people in your life who've ever done anything good for you? And then he like went through the whole, he had a kind of little flashback scene where he had seen all these white people who he had seen previously in the movie who did him wrong. And he said, you know what, you got a point. And that's why the nation kind of, the whole some of that dogma of the Nation of Islam, along with other tenets that were solid, he really kind of liked. So he caught on to. And if he had just stayed in that environment, that would have been what he understood.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the intellectual has to broaden their horizons, So some of these people, let's go back to what you're talking about with the politics. One of the shortcomings, I believe, of some of these progressives, not all of them, but some of them who are dem bashing, as you say, I think that they don't, some of them are lacking a wider worldview. I usually agree with their morality and their politics as far as what they would like to happen.
Yeah.
But some of their complaints don't apply to the of where we are and what's going on.
Right.
Don't apply to the reality of the situation. They don't.
Exactly.
They're not looking at all the facts. Now, do the Democrats need a lot of criticism, or did they earn a lot of that criticism? Absolutely. But right now, unfortunately, and some of it might be you could blame on mismanagement or poor politicking, or not understanding the American people necessarily as much as in some quarters as much as they could. But regardless of what the reason is, right now they have no leverage in government.
None.
So there's nothing. So they can't do anything.
No.
But what I think they could do better, I think they could do some other things better. But as far as getting legislation passed or stopping people, this administration from doing some of the things they are doing, they don't have, the way our government is constructed, they don't have the ability to do that.
Right.
They're voting in a block. I could see that criticism if it was like they were voting all over the place and they weren't united. But pretty much they're voting 100% against a lot of these terrible things.
A lot of these things. Yeah, you're right.
So
go ahead.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. What I wish they would do better, and hopefully, platforms like this will we can do our part. Is they need to explain better to the American people what's going on. Right. Something, I know myself, and I've made this assumption, and when I lived in other places in the country, I realized differently. I grew up here in the, my father worked for the government all his life, so I worked in a household that was very government sensitive. Woke up, we got the Washington Post every day, read the paper every day, watched the news. We were a 6 o'clock news household, all of that. So, when I moved, when I lived for a little while in a couple of years in Texas, and then about 5 years in Denver, and sometime in Atlanta, but I'm using Texas and Denver mainly because I was shocked at how little people knew what was going on. Like I would make a
Wow.
comment about current events and they would say, "Oh yeah, really?" you know?
Well, when you talk about what people know, like just talking about Denver and Texas, and you talking about current events, going back to what you said about the Dems, something that they can do. They don't brag enough. They don't talk enough about the stuff
Right.
that they do.
Right.
Like when Malcolm X, the guy was converting him in prison.
Right.
He asked him, "What white person's ever done anything good for you?"
Right.
And then you hear Umar Johnson. He says that he said, in fact, he took it a step further. He said there has never been a white person that has done nothing for the black man in order for him to progress. Well, the first thing I say then is, why aren't we still slaves? If there hasn't been one white person
Right.
that had this generalizing makes it difficult, and it's hard to fight that generalizing if you're the Dems, since you got all of these media companies, ABC, all of them kowtowing, CNN, Jack Tapper, all of them kowtowing to this guy. And instead of saying, you know what, let's do something different, the Dems should be hitting people directly. They should hit people like our show, even though we're not big yet.
Mhm.
They should hit all of these pro-black imposter shows, all of these shows, and say, let me come on your show. Let me talk to your people. They should be doing town halls consistently across the nation, answering questions, showing what they've done, showing the vote counts of the people who did it. Talk about the 17 billion to HBCUs. Talk about how inflation was slowed down. Brag about it. But they're not doing that. They're trying to do it through the regular means that are dominated by the conservatives, the GOP. But they actually reached out to small people and go to these black communities. Go to Houston, talk to people all the time. Go to Little Rock, go to Birmingham,
Right.
educate these people. Hell, come here in Northern Virginia and talk to these people
Right.
about it. But
Well,
it's hard to fight when
it's
you're going against all of that.
well, it is hard to fight, but there's some basic thing now. All of these things, well, a lot of these things require money too. So,
Mm.
um, I don't want to just ignore that. You do need money for some of these things, but there's certain things that this is where the MAGA world and the Trump folks are like way ahead, as in my view. Have you seen these commercials for President Trump?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Now that's being paid for by a PAC that's, I don't know, pro Trump PAC.
yeah.
And it's like, thank you, President Trump.
It might be being paid by Qatar, but anyway, yeah,
Yeah, okay, well, whomever, somebody's paying for it. I'm saying you got to pay for commercial time. So I'm saying this is
yeah,
going to require money, but the Democrats have money.
yeah.
I mean, they can get money.
Hmm.
I think, the Harris campaign spent a lot of money. So we can get
Yeah,
money, we need to. All right.
right.
The thing is that where are the Democratic ads that are talking about the terrible things that the Trump administration is doing every single day? They
Yeah.
should have an ad that runs to, like when I was a kid, when I was a little kid, I barely, I do remember this though. On the evening news every night, they used to have the casualties of the Vietnam War.
Mm.
They did the same thing during COVID. Sometimes,
Hmm.
so and so,
Yeah.
this many people died of COVID today and all of that. But they used to, say this many people died in the war today, and this many people were injured in the war today.
They did that during the Iraq War as well.
Right, right.
Yeah.
There should be a commercial that they say the Trump administration fired 300,000 American workers today. The
Hmm.
Trump administration today levied a tariff that is going to increase prices. People project, because you can't say this absolutely, but by X amount of dollars.
Hmm.
This company is saying they can't do. They're going to have to lay off so many workers because of these tariffs that are coming.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because people don't watch the people what Trump understands, and the Trump people understand. I hate giving him credit for everything, but the Trump people understand is this: people don't necessarily watch the news. They don't, or the mainstream news or any type of news. but you can stick a commercial in there and it'll subliminally hit you in
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he's getting it. So we can't keep having these lawmakers, these Democratic lawmakers or Democratic pundits or talking heads or whatever, keep going on MSNBC or CNN or wherever they
Yeah.
go
That's not working. That's not working.
because people aren't watching that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you have to and you can like try to stick them on like The View or something. No one cares about that. But
Right.
put it in a commercial and make it real plain. Because those commercials, man, the lies are flying on those commercials, man.
Yeah. They
They're
are.
just, I mean, they just say wild stuff. And then at the end, they're like, thank you, President Trump. And I'm like, wow. They
That
just
was
said a whole bunch of
bullshit.
stuff.
You're watching it, you're like, this commercial is bullshit.
Right.
Yeah, you're sitting there. I can't. This happened recently to me, and one of those commercials came on.
Mhm.
And I'm sitting in a waiting room, and I said, that's bullshit. I said, I wanted them to hear it.
Yeah.
I'm in a doctor's office, and they got it on. I'm saying, that's bullshit.
Yeah.
Somebody said, sir, can you hold your voice down? I said, well, then turn off this bullshit. Because it's pissed me off. And,
Right.
and you're right about, you got these pundits going on MSNBC, CNN. I mean, you can't fight CNN when they're giving big money to Scott Jennings to be a contributor on the show. But the
Yeah.
main reason I said go to these podcasts, these YouTube channels,
Well,
where people got all of these views. Put some money in it. Go talk to them. Because a good video, you get 3 million views. The money that you put in actually doing that pays for itself. So there's a way of doing it directly to get on that playing field with them. They got to stop using the same tricks the GOP does.
Yeah,
they control that.
That's true. No, that is. I hear you there,
Mm-hmm.
and I do think that what you're talking about, that strategy would work.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing that one of the reasons why I think the commercials, or at least those Trump commercials, are a good ploy. I don't know if they're working or not.
Right.
They don't work on, they
piss me off.
They piss me off, but as I was saying, and now my mind is scattered. I got another point I want to make, but anyway, let me talk about, as far as this is concerned, they need the left need to find some new voices, new messengers to come out there, because even though I agree with most of what these people say, I don't want to see Chuck Schumer anymore, dude. I don't need to see that dude. I don't need to see half of the, if not all of the Democratic leadership. They turn me off, and I agree with them.
Well, it's like this, and I want you to get your other point out too. Yeah. It's like this. They need to see more. They need to see more of AOC, Jasmine Crockett, the Young Bucks. They need to see more of them, because the people that are going to vote are the ones that are intelligent, but also the ones that see those two great ladies as peers, somebody who actually gets them. Right. Schumer, even though we agree with him, Young Buck ain't going to really relate to him. And then the way they're going to look at Schumer is by what these pro-black imposters say about Schumer.
Right, exactly.
So you're fighting that as well. You're fighting the Breakfast Club. I can't stand the Breakfast Club because they are being used. They have a platform where they can bring in all these great people, but their bosses, don't talk too much about that. Like the CEO of Disney told Whoopi and them at The View, hey, don't bad talk the orange guy too much. I'm like, all of y'all. And I think that's a huge problem right now. We got a bunch of people who are in a position of power, scared to flex their power. Yes, sir, Mr. President. Yeah. You got it, boss. Man.
Yeah, those people, the people around the president, they're just flunkies. They're the same folks. But the people like the Breakfast Club and Stephen A. Smith and all these other folks, this is the, it's money. I mean, money is a thing. Money is a thing, and it's a real issue. And I know that I don't know what goes on behind the scenes. I have a hard time believing, or maybe I'm just deluding myself. I have a hard time believing that some of those people, who host those shows, are as much in the bag or are purposefully
Being an idiot or
being an
purposely
idiot.
being an idiot.
Correct. Yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah. But they're doing what they need to do in
Mm-hmm.
order to get clicks or to make their sponsors happy, so they'll stay sponsors. If you're somebody who the people consider to be in the know,
Mm-hmm.
and so therefore, if it's on the Breakfast Club, then this must be.
Must be true.
I don't want to say I don't want to conflate the Breakfast Club with like OAN or Fox News. It's not the
No, they
same
had some
thing.
good moments. They do have some good
Yeah, it's not the
moments. They
same
have some
thing.
good
But there are
moments.
times when they do not tell the whole story, or they allow a
That's right.
guest to
Right.
get a few off without
Mm-hmm.
being challenged.
Yeah.
Now, because there was I mentioned Stephen A. Smith, and this was the other thing that came to my mind when I was thinking about that. One
Mm-hmm.
of the things that, and this is, I think, almost unique to him, but it's a symptom of what you're talking about. He played a clip. Jake Tapper wrote that book about
Yeah.
Biden. All
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
and he went on Megyn Kelly's show. Now, I don't like
Woo! I
Megyn
didn't
Kelly.
look. I didn't know he went on Megan Kelly's show.
Yeah, he's trying to sell a book. He's trying to sell a book.
Oh, for a second you thought. I thought for a second you said Stephen A.
Oh,
But
I'm sure.
Jack.
No, wait. I would imagine Stephen A. Smith has gone on a show.
Okay.
I would imagine he's been on there before. I didn't
Hmm.
see that, but I'm sure he has.
Uh,
Um,
I hope not.
he goes on Hannity. I'm sure he went on Megyn Kelly's show.
Whew, got a
But
point.
he was talking about this particular clip that he played, where Megyn Kelly kind of got on Jake Tapper with his book by saying, we were talking about the conservative media. When I say we, I'm kind of paraphrasing Megyn Kelly. She said, we were reporting this stuff about Biden 2, 3, 4 years ago, and y'all were saying, oh, you don't see him in the meetings, he's sharp as a tack, and you don't see this and that. So frankly, she was kind of saying, you were kind of complicit in this little thing that you're saying was a cover up in your book.
Mm.
Now that he's lost, you're trying to sell this book like, oh boy, look, Biden was on the decline. And she's like, well, this was a story that you could have helped tell in real time. Now you're trying to sell it as a book that is like some investigative journalism. And she's
Yeah.
like, we could see it all in real time. Now I think she made a decent point. That's not what I'm going to
Yeah.
bring up.
You know what?
Yeah.
I don't like her.
Yeah.
But what she says, you gotta be like, well, if that's the case, and
Yeah.
this was going on, you were
Right.
there, so
Right,
you're
right,
part
yeah,
of, you're
right. You got to
complicit
call a
in this
spade a spade.
bullshit.
Jake Tapper was kind of trying to backpedal and say, "Oh well, the Biden White House really didn't like me," or blah blah blah. And she's just like, "Come on, Jake,"
Yeah.
But then he went on to talk about how much he just piled it on, how much he respects Megyn Kelly, and she's legit, and this and that, and this and that, and that's the stuff. If he really, really, really believes that, then he does, and I've freedom of he can say whatever he wants to, but.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he really, 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 really believes that or needs to say that. I just think we got these people out there who do these things so they can make more money.
Right.
They can do the things they want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And this is not the time to do that kind of stuff.
It's not, and that's my problem. It's not. It's not the time to be doing that. When I hear Snoop Dogg making excuses, when I hear Stephen A. jumping back and forth, I'm like, dude, this interview contradicts the last interview. When I hear Nelly bringing up the crime bill, when I'm like, you lived during that time, crack cocaine was an issue.
Right.
We wanted help. When I hear all these people going back and forth, making these excuses, I'm sitting here saying, are you paying attention what's happening now? This guy is taking $6 billion bribes from Qatar. He's inviting people to pay him $1 million to have access to him. There's a rumor that 4 of the congressmen flipped their vote because their families were being threatened. The bill vote. But all of these people need to understand now is not the time to be doing all of this. Now is not the time to be thinking about your pockets because it could be only short term. You got our rights being taken away. You got idiots who also worked with Qatar, Pascal. Pam Bondi.
Pam Bondi, yeah.
They were both doing consulting work for Qatar.
Right.
And now you got just ICE just grabbing U.S. citizens who are of Latin descent, just grabbing them. One
Yeah.
dude got grabbed; he had to sit in detention for hours, and he's an American citizen.
Oh, they arrested that congresswoman for assaulting an ICE person.
And that's her job.
She's not going to. I mean, everyone's seen the film. I mean, she didn't assault anyone. And in fact, she said that the guy who she got accused of assaulting, he ended up giving them a tour inside the place after they got in. It was just a pushing situation.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And she was trying to push him away from the mayor.
Yeah.
No one would have gotten arrested in a normal circumstance like that for doing what happened there. Mm-hmm. She got arrested because that's a note to say, look, we will, you may not go to jail for it, you may not get convicted for it, but we will make your life inconvenient if you do something that is going to get in the way of our agenda.
And what gets me is that you got a lot of people, once again, who just keep ignoring that. Like you said, you got a lot of people who still saying, I can't believe that he was going to actually do that. Because you have like CNN, what you just said. CNN didn't really tell the rest of that. They didn't tell the rest of that story. Even their headline doesn't even come to approaching that. And most people nowadays aren't reading past the headlines.
Right.
And then they're just listening to what the anchor says.
Right.
And that's why fighting that for the Dems is so difficult. That's why I was talking about the challenge we were. So if we keep just going along, thinking everything's normal, thinking that, Stephen A. jumps back and forth on topics because, he's getting $20 million a year. He's got a 5-year contract for $20 million a year. Dude, I am daily trying to figure out a way to get the message across. And I'm hoping that we can do it with this right here. So